Hello and welcome to Magic Boy Productions, where we build and play powerful commander decks and learn along the way. I'm Ben, aka Magic Boy on Magic Online, and today we'll be testing out a unique mono-green Voltron deck helmed by Final Fantasy VII villain Professor Hojo. This video will consist of a deck overview, a few games followed by reviews where we break down our play and our opponents to see what we can learn, and then our final thoughts on the deck. Be sure to check out the full deck list in the description. I want to take a quick moment to thank all of my subscribers. We passed the 200 mark this week and are still growing every day, and it means a lot to have people connecting with my content. With that out of the way, let's see what's going on with this deck. Hojo is a one-card engine, giving us both effective mana and cards in a narrow, limited way. He makes it so that the first activated ability we target one of our own creatures with costs 2 less, and then once each turn lets us draw a card when one or more of our creatures become the target of an activated ability. It can be hard to envision what that means, but in practice we'll be using equipment to take advantage of both abilities during our turn, and then other cheap activated abilities during our opponent's turns to make the most of our commander. Since we're playing equipment already, our primary win condition is through commander damage from a beefed up mad scientist. Equipment are central to this deck, so we'll start there. We play 21 total with a variety of effects. Several of them ramp us to be able to do more and more each turn cycle, others produce additional card advantage supplementing Hojo's card draw, others just provide buffs to help Hojo close out the game, and a few are extremely versatile, with our Jites also able to trigger Hojo on other players' turns, in addition to their other effects. Commander's Plate deserves a special mention. This makes Hojo very hard to deal with or block, and is one of our best forms of evasion. We also play Zephyr Boots, and our Swords of X and Y can allow us to attack opponents opportunistically to get value and damage. Because we play so many of them, Fire Shrieker is a great way to double up on sword triggers and quickly close out the game. Generally, we want an equipment in our opening hand and should mulligan aggressively to find one, since Hojo can easily offset the cards that we go down. The 1-drop equipment are best in class here, since we can start drawing with Hojo as soon as he comes down, but our other equipment still let us draw our card on turn 3 and get in a powerful attack with Hojo. The second way to take advantage of Hojo is by targeting our creatures during other players' turns. We play several cards that allow us to target freely, some of which provide other utility. Few of them grant 1/1 counters, so we lean into that as a sub-theme of the deck that supports the overall beatdown game plan. We also have several lands that target, including some creature lands that can even target themselves to help maximize the card draw from our commander. It's worth noting that triggered abilities like Bristly Bills don't count for Hojo. Agatha's Soul Cauldron is a little deceptive on this front, since it looks like an activated ability but actually adds the counter as a trigger. We play other ramp beyond the equipment that gets us ahead on mana. With all this card draw, effects that let us put additional lands into play can be very powerful. Kodama of the West Tree can get us lands steadily, or sometimes en masse when we have a wide board loaded up with counters. All three of our game changers, Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox, and Mox Diamond, help us play ahead of curve as well. Since Hojo only costs 2, we run a third Mox, Mox Amber. Nissa Who Shakes the World is some top-end ramp, and Free Strider Lookout can get us extra mileage out of our effects that can target repeatedly, since giving an opposing creature trample counts as a crime. We don't play any card advantage outside our commander and his toys, but we do run some recursion in Eternal Witness and Evolution Witness, which can let us rebuy key spells. We play a healthy amount of interaction, aiming for versatility overall, with some powerful creature-based interaction that can pick up an equipment or get +1/+1 counters. Our sweepers are all colorless, and this deck tends to play sweepers more proactively. They're a nice failsafe if things go really wrong, but with all our card draw and ramp, there will be moments to look out for where our opponents are over-leveraged to the board without cards in hand. Wiping everything out and quickly rebuilding can close the game out fast, and so it's something to be aware of. Finally, Nissa Ascended Animus can create board presence or interact in the mid-game, but can also be a powerful finisher when played at full cost. We play 39 lands if you count Chrome Mox, which I do, and in addition to the activated abilities mentioned earlier, we fit in a solid amount of utility since we're a monocolored deck. Fittingly, since Hojo is a primary antagonist in Final Fantasy VII, this is something of an arch-enemy deck. We're going to be making at least one enemy as early as turn 3, and making the rest of the table pretty nervous. Sometimes another player will have an explosive start and we get to play the hero, but we should definitely expect people to defend themselves or interact with us proactively because they know we're coming for them eventually. We can help mitigate this by spreading the love in the early game, which also has a tactical component. Getting 5 commander damage on an opponent early and then leaving them alone opens us up to finishing them off on a later turn. My strategy is usually to ride the storm, attacking opportunistically to ensure we get value from whatever equipment we draw. If we have a Sword of Fire and Ice, we can attack freely into the Izzet player, and so on, or we can attack the player who has left themselves open by ramping and drawing cards. I'm not generally a fan of Voltron as plan A personally, but Hojo brings some interesting elements to the archetype that are worth exploring, and is extremely consistent. We don't really have any tutors to speak of, so even with a consistent play pattern, the game themselves are usually fairly different depending on what equipment and other support pieces we draw. Let's jump into some games and see the deck in action. We won the die roll and get to go first. Our first opponent is Una, Hope of Spira. This Selesnya commander is one I'm planning to build soon, so I'm interested to see what our opponent's take is. Una grants lifelink trample and ward to herself and enchantment creatures during its controller's turn, and can reanimate an enchantment from the graveyard on their end step. It's meant to pair with the summon saga creatures from Final Fantasy, but can potentially cheat big enchantments into play. I'm expecting a fairly standard enchantress engine as well. Next up is Quasar, Augur of Agonies. This commander translates card draw into life drain, weaponizing the dirtling that Esper players typically get up to. White, blue, and black are excellent control colors, so this opponent is likely to be the most disruptive at the table. We can also expect to see other card draw synergies and sources of big card draw like Wheels or Peer Through the Abyss. Kellogg, Dangerous Mind, is our final opponent. This is another commander that I've always found intriguing. Kellogg has a 3/2 first strike haste body that lets him get into combat in the early game and makes treasures on attack. He can also sacrifice 5 treasures to gain control of a creature for as long as he's on the board, and we can expect some artifact synergies, particularly treasures, backed up with an aggressive plan. Our opening hand is pretty flooded. It does have a cheap equipment to pair with Hojo and a powerful sweeper that we can try to play around, but it really feels like we can do better, so we mulligan. Our second 7 is very strong, mostly because it contains a soul ring, but also has a bristly bill for additional board presence, an equipment that can ramp us while building a board, some powerful interaction against an enchantment tech and potential artifact deck, and a powerful source of protection, along with 2 lands. Una mulligans down to 6, and everyone else keeps 7, and we draw a forest, then play a forest and cast our soul ring, which we use to cast Staff of Titania. Our opponents just play out lands for their respective first turns, meaning that we are definitely the archenemy. We draw one of our game changers, Ancient Tomb, then cast Hojo and use the floating mana in his discount to equip the staff. That draws us Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which will probably let us disrupt Una's plan down the line. We play out a forest before tapping out and passing. Una plays a forest as well and casts an Arcane Signet. Quasar has an Underground Sea and then a Dimir Signet. Kellogg plays a Swamp and then casts a Braid, destroying our Staff of Titania. We draw Sword of Truth and Justice and cast Bristly Bill, floating a colorless, then play our Nykthos. Bill puts a counter on the Professor, and then we cast Sword of Truth and Justice, but unfortunately we encounter the first of Magic Online's Hojo issues. We've got an auto yield setting enabled so that if we don't have any actions to take, we just automatically pass priority, and apparently Magic Online doesn't recognize the free equip from Hojo as an action to take, and moves us straight into combat. This is something to keep in mind for the future. We attack into the Kellogg player, punishing them for taking away our toy and inflicting 3 commander damage. Una casts Kodama's Reach, searching up 2 forests and putting them both into play before passing. Quasar plays an Isolated Chapel and uses it to help cast their commander. Kellogg has another Swamp and casts their commander. The hasty Rakdos Legend swings at us, making a treasure, and then connects for 3 commander damage. We draw Blinkmoth Nexus and equip our sword to Hojo before anything else, drawing a Pip-Boy from his trigger. We cast the Pip-Boy and then equip it to Bill. We play the Blinkmoth Nexus and Bill gives himself a counter and then cast our Agatha's Soul Cauldron. We'd been planning to attack with Bill, but as we head to combat, realized that with Proliferation, he can help protect us from opportunistic Kellogg attacks and decide to leave him back. Instead, we swing Hojo at Quasar, hopefully signaling to Kellogg that we're not interested in a cycle of violence after the Abrade. We connect for 5 commander damage and triggered the sword, adding another counter to Bill and then proliferating both of our creatures. With a bit of defense in place, we pass. Una misses a land drop, but casts Heliod Suncrowned, which is a little scary due to its combo potential, and then a Starfield Mystic. Unsurprisingly, Quasar sends their trigger our way when they draw for the turn, then plays a Reliquary Tower and casts Ledger Shredder. They follow up with a Marauding Blight Priest, which will let them translate their targeted drain into table-wide damage. Ledger Shredder triggers, and they loot away a Marsh Flats and direct another ping our way. Kellogg also misses a land drop, but uses their treasure to cast Arcbound Condor, which is a very cool card that you don't always see in treasure decks. They attack into Una, creating a treasure and shrinking the Blight Priest with the Condor. Una doesn't block, and after combat, Kellogg passes to us. We draw the very powerful Commander's Plate and cast and equip it to Hojo immediately, which draws us the Mycosynth Garden. We play the Garden, and Bristly Bill puts another 1/1 counter on Hojo. We then move the Pip-Boy over to Hojo, where it should have been in the first place, and head to combat, attacking Quasar. The Pip-Boy triggers on attack, and since we're low on resources, we opt to loot away our Ancient Tomb, holding on to the Witch's Clinic we find. Thanks to protection from everything but green, Hojo connects, bringing Quasar up to 15 commander damage and triggering Sword of Truth and Justice. We add another counter to Bill, and then proliferate both creatures again. Una casts Archon of Sun's Grace, a card that can easily get out of hand in an enchantment deck. On their draw step, Quasar drains us again, and when they gain their life, Blight Priest triggers and drains the table. They cast Thirst for Meaning, drawing 3 and discarding an Orzhov Signet and a Swamp, which sends 3 drain our way, and then 3 more life loss from the Blight Priest around the table. They follow up with Tolarian Winds, triggering the Ledger Shredder to discard Mangara the Diplomat and set up another ping and drain combo, and then the Winds resolves. They discard Glacial Fortress, Jace Wielder of Mysteries, Sphinx's Revelation, and Thought Vessel, drawing 4 new cards. Quasar and the Priest trigger again 4 more times, and when all is said and done, Una and Kellogg have 28 life left, and we're down to 17. They play a clear water pathway, and as they pass priority, we activate our Soul Cauldron to exile Mangara from their graveyard and add another counter to Bill. They attack us for 2 in the air with Ledger Shredder before passing. Kellogg is still struggling to hit land drops, but casts Captain Lineary Storm, except it's Van from Final Fantasy. They head to combat, sending both their creatures at Quasar and producing 2 treasures. The Condor sees this and uses its 2 triggers to take out the Blight Priest. Quasar blocks Kellogg, but before damage, the Dangerous Mind sacrifices 2 treasures, pumping Lannery to cast Return to Action, getting the first striker up to 4 power and giving it lifelink. This triggers Ledger Shredder, which loots away a Letter of Acceptance and lets Quasar drain Kellogg for 1. Lannery connects for 4 damage, and Kellogg takes down Quasar in combat, then they pass to us. We activate our Blinkmoth Nexus, turning it into a creature, then tap it to pump itself, drawing a forest off Hojo. We draw a Bridgeworks Battle, which goes very well with our Witch's Clinic, which we play, pumping our commander with Bill. This is where we encounter the second MTGO Hojo bug. Witch's Clinic should cost 2 less to activate, but for some reason it doesn't. I'm guessing it saw Bill's trigger targeting and counted that, but Magic Online really seems to hate this commander. We activate Witch's Clinic with Soul Ring instead, giving Hojo lifelink and drawing a Scavenging Ooze. We then use Bridgeworks Battle to pump Hojo further and fight the Archon before Una can get a herd of flying lifelinkers going, gaining a tidy 14 life in the process. There's been some chatter at the table since last turn, with Quasar wondering why Kellogg bothered to mess with them since we would surely be taking them out. The thing is, with Quasar's board gone and only 3 cards in hand, they aren't that much of a threat anymore. It's probably optimal to take them out while we can, but odds are they'll spend their whole turn recasting their commander, and then we can just knock them out the next turn. It also feels a little mean to gang up on them. So as we head to combat, we swing Hojo at Kellogg. The way our commander damage is going to progress, we'll just be able to one-shot Una eventually, so it's a bit of a waste to attack them. Whereas this will mean Hojo will still be lethal on the Rakdos commander even if someone takes out all our equipment. Pip-Boy finds us a free Strider Lookout on attack, and we discard the asceticism that's been clogging up our hand. We connect, bringing them up to 17 Hojo damage and down to 17 life, and this time we give the extra counter to Hojo before proliferating. After that we pass, kicking ourselves for not leaving up Blinkmoth Nexus to draw another card. Una plays Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, which we love to see. They cast a Sterling Grove, which we're less thrilled about, and then follow up with a Therapede, which is a cool little card in a Saga deck. That triggers Ledger Shredder, and Quasar loots away a Felwar Stone, making the bird a hefty 4/6. Una just passes after that. Quasar casts Path of Peril, uncleaved, and we do indeed have some regrets, but we're still in a pretty great position. All of the mana value 2 or less creatures are taken down, including Ledger Shredder, leaving Kellogg's board intact. It seems like this was a misunderstanding on Quasar's part, but I actually kind of like the play as is, since Kellogg is pretty incentivized to go after us at this point. After that, they just play a Deserted Beach and pass. Kellogg plays a Tarian Soul Cleaver, which triggers the Condor, which shrinks the Therapede. Una responds by casting Silence, which we love to see since that was probably better used against us. They equip the Soul Cleaver to Kellogg and head to combat, attacking us with everything. Kellogg creates a treasure before they connect, bringing us down to 35. We draw Blackblade Reforge and recast our commander first thing. We equip Commander's Plate to him, drawing a Perilous Vault, and then finally cast our Druid of Purification. This is another class of card that's a little weird on Magic Online because it doesn't clearly show what others have chosen. Communicating in chat can help, but at this point we're the archenemy, so I don't want to try to influence things and potentially make anyone feel bad. We target the Sterling Grove, and both the other players end up targeting the Condor, which triggers its modular in the Soul Cleaver when it dies. After that we pass, and Una all but taps out for a Sanctuary Warden, suggesting they're doing some of their counter manipulation. Quasar casts Psychosis Crawler, which is a great play since it can actually block Hojo. Kellogg plays another Swamp, then sacrifices 2 treasures to cast a Marionette Master, triggering Lannery Storm in the Soul Cleaver twice. The Master fabricates onto itself, getting up to 4 power. They head to combat, swinging their commander at Una and Lannery at Quasar before adding 2 more treasures to their trove. Una blocks with their Angel, and Kellogg sacrifices a treasure, triggering Lannery in the Soul Cleaver to get Kellogg up to 6 toughness. Marionette Master also hits us for 4 when the treasure hits the bin. The Angel loses a shield counter, and Lannery connects with Quasar. In their second main, they use a treasure to try to reanimate the Archon of Sun's Grace, triggering their permanence and smacking us for 4 again, but we put a stop to that with the Soul Cauldron, adding a counter to our Druid. Reanimate fizzles, and they sacrifice their last treasure for another round of triggers, making Kellogg a 9/8 and dropping us to 23. We draw another Sword of the Forge and Frontier variety and cast it. We equip it to Hojo for free, drawing an Ursipine, then activate Witch's Clinic targeting Hojo and equip it with Sword of Truth and Justice as well. We head to combat, and it's time to take Kellogg out of the game. We swing in with Hojo, knocking them out and triggering both our swords. Forge and Frontier finds us a Demolition Field and a Scythecat Cub, and Truth and Justice adds a counter to Hojo before proliferating both our creatures. After combat, we play the field and then use it to cast Scythecat Cub with some help from Una's Yavimaya. Una plays a Cursed Verge and finally casts their commander. When they head to their end step to try to bring back Sterling Grove, we shut that down with Soul Cauldron. Quasar draws, triggering the Psychosis Crawler, and then just recast their commander before passing. We draw Summoning Materia, then equip Pip-Boy to Hojo for free, finding a Balaged Recovery. That MDFC lets us grab another from our graveyard, Bridgeworks Battle, and after using the Clinic to give Hojo lifelink again, we cast the Fight spell to pump him a bit more and take down the pesky colorless blocker. We head to combat, using Pip-Boy to untap 2 lands this time, and finish off Quasar. The swords trigger, finding us a Scavenger Grounds and a Burgeoning, then adding a counter to our Cub before we proliferate. We play Scavenger Grounds, triggering Scythecat Cub on itself, then pass, and after their draw step, Una conceals concedes, meaning that we win the game. GG's to our opponents. Obviously, that was a Sol Ring start, so we had a lot of momentum throughout the game thanks to our steady flow of card advantage. I picked this game to showcase since it highlights the game plan really well and shows some of the weird issues playing Hojo on Magic Online. Yuna didn't really get off the ground throughout that game, which is disappointing because their deck seemed pretty cool, leaning into counter manipulation to go with the sagas that we never got to see. I think that deck could probably use a little more focus since they had a few pieces of different packages that didn't quite line up. Quasar performed basically exactly as expected. The Kellogg player mentioned in chat that they had past experience with Quasar decks, but I think the Quasar threat is very telegraphed, so this commander should expect to be on the receiving end of aggression. We got punished for letting them live and probably should have factored in them wiping the board given their colors. I really like them playing to their outs with that Cyclosis Crawler. It was just enough of a roadblock to incentivize us to take out Kellogg first, buying them another turn to try to find answers. Kellogg was a little choked on mana, which may have been bad luck, but could have also been a deck building issue. It's pretty common for aggressive decks to skimp on lands, especially with a commander that ramps, but I think it's still a good idea to include at least 40 while leaning into utility. They had some cool synergies and were able to apply pressure throughout the game, but ended up running out of gas after stumbling a bit. This game highlights why I'm not a fan of playing Voltron decks, which is the tension between playing the game and having fun, and winning. Having to knock out one player first is a weird amount of agency on the level of fun in the game overall, and when you're ahead like we were, it tends to feel like kicking people when they're down. I think Voltron is a totally valid archetype, but it just doesn't feel great a lot of the time. That feel bad component is mitigated a little bit on Magic Online, where the player can just hop into another lobby instead of having to sit around and wait for the game to end. Let's check out another game. Our first opponent is Ishin 2 Heavens as 1, a Mardu commander that doubles up on attack triggers. With a focus on combat, this commander tends to be very aggressive and has gotten some fun new toys in recent sets. Ishin won the die roll and will be going first, with us going second. In the third seat, we have Tatyova Benthic Druid. This isn't Tatyova's first time on the channel, and the Simic landfall commander is always a force to be reckoned with, drawing cards and gaining life simply by putting lands into play. We can expect landfall synergies and powerful expensive spells to make those land drops pay off. Going last is Aerith Gainsborough, a mono-white Soul Sister style commander that gets a +1/+1 counter whenever its controller gains life, and can provide a massive pump to other legendary creatures when she dies. I didn't play Final Fantasy VII, but I'm told this is a pretty gutting representation of her role in the series. This commander seems to be a bit tricky to use to its full potential, so I'm curious to see what the pilot has in store for us. Soul Sisters Voltron is the most straightforward build, but there's room for Legends Matter play and sacrifice synergies as well. Our first 7 is terrible, with 5 lands and no way to trigger Hojo, so we mulligan. Our second 7 isn't exciting, but it's serviceable. We can play Hojo on 2 and Sword of Light and Shadow on 3, which will hopefully find us some more action since the recursion isn't likely to matter for a bit. Ozolith the Shattered Spire can help get more Hojo triggers, and Free Strider Lookout could be a valuable source of ramp in the future. Aerith mulls to 6, but everyone else keeps 7 cards, and Ishin kicks things off with the dreaded land into Sol Ring into Mana Rock start. Looks like we have an archenemy. We draw a Bridgeworks Battle, which could help keep Ishin in check down the line, and play one of our forests. Tatyova has a forest and a Sol Ring of their own, which means that Ishin will hopefully go after them first. Aerith plays a Plains and gets their Soul Sisters engine running with a Hinterland Sanctifier. Ishin has an Evolving Wilds, which they crack for a tap swamp before casting Delina, Wild Mage. We draw Lost Jite, which can help us squeeze some extra value out of Hojo or our Lookout. We play a forest and cast our commander before passing. Tatyova plays an island and casts Io Rune Expedition so that they can squeeze even more cards out of their land drops. Aerith plays a Plains and casts Path to Exile targeting Delina, which is nice to see, but might have been better used during Ishin's upkeep to keep them from ramping and fixing their mana heading into their turn. Ishin plays a Mountain and casts Helm of the Host, which she follows up with Adeline Resplendent Cathar, which can get very out of hand with their commander even without the Helm. We draw Balagan Recovery and cast our Jite, equipping it to Hojo and drawing a Shadow Spear. We play our Scavenger Grounds and cast the Ozolith, which can potentially double up the 1/1 counters from our Jite. We could have used Bridgeworks Battle to take out Adeline after untapping a land with the Jite, but with 2 scary opponents on Sol Ring starts, it feels better to develop our board than to try to disrupt theirs when they're just going to be able to have a powerful follow-up. It's also pretty likely that the bulk of Ishin's aggression will be directed at Tatyova. We head to combat, swinging Hojo at the Simic commander for 2 commander damage, netting a counter on Lost Jite. Tatyova plays a Scoot Swarm and then a Ruin Crab. They follow up with Broker's Hideout, triggering all their landfall effects. This nets them an insect, and then the Hideout sacrifices itself to gain them a life and grab another forest, which triggers their landfall permanents again. Ruin Crab mills 3 from everybody else, including our Budoka Gardener, Eternal Witness, and Scavenging Ooze. Scoot Swarm makes them another insect, and the Crab mills again, hitting Asceticism, Blackblade Reforged, and Sword of the Animist, and they had 2 counters to their expedition. They passed after that with several blockers at the ready. Aerith has a plains and casts their commander, triggering the Sanctifier when she enters to pick up her first counter. Ishin plays another mountain and adds their commander to the mix. They equip the helm to Adeline and then head to combat. The helm triggers, making them a second copy of the Resplendent Cathar, and then they attack with an Adeline apiece at us and Tadiova. Ouch. Both of the Adelines trigger twice thanks to Ishin, creating 4/1/1 soldier tokens attacking each of us and buffing the Adelines up to 15 power. Tadiova does some blocking, electing to trade tokens rather than jumping, and Aerith blocks a soldier. We and Tadiova both get smacked down to 21, and Aerith remains life neutral thanks to lifelink, picking up another counter. We head into our turn and things aren't looking good, and the summoner's material we draw isn't going to get us out of this. We cast Shadow Spear and equip it, looking for answers, but the Uvenwald tracker we find is a little slow for what's happening. We cast our Free Strider Lookout, then head to combat, attacking Hojo into Tatiova to get a second counter on our Jite and gain some life. Our best chance at this point seems to be hoping that Tatiova or Aerith have an answer to the board, and this way we can use the Jite and the Lookout to get a few more lands into play in the event that we get to rebuild. Tatiova doesn't seem like they'll be much help though. They cast their commander, then play a Seat of the Synod, which is an intriguing land out of that deck. It triggers landfall just fine though, and they create an insect, draw a card and gain a life off Tatiova, mill our Oblivion Stone, Sword of Fire and Ice, and the Mycosynth Garden, and then put a third counter on the expedition. They cash those counters in for 2 more cards before passing. Aerith plays a Plains and casts Heliod's Intervention for X equal to 2, choosing the Gain 4 in Life mode, which triggers Aerith. It definitely seems like the play there was taking out Helm of the Host and Soul Ring, so along with the earlier Path to Exile sequencing, I'm pretty sure this player is probably a novice. They head into combat and attack us with Aerith, which is again not the best play. Aerith would be able to negate some damage and gain life by blocking, and we are hardly a threat, but we can save a lot more life chump blocking Adeline, so we let her through. This brings Aerith up to 50 life, so it's possible that they think that they can outgain Ishin's board, but the mouth doesn't support that. We activate our Jite on their end step, making the Sanctifier unable to block since it doesn't really matter. That crime triggers the Lookout, and we put a Witch's Clinic into play. Ishin plays a Plains and then Sword of the Animist, which they equip to their copy of Adeline. They head to combat, netting a third Adeline from the helm, but then just attack Aerith with a single Cathar. Attacking correctly with everything would have taken all of us out, barring interaction, so I'm a little confused by the decision. They still get 6 Adeline triggers for 18 total tapped and attacking soldiers, and 2 Sword of the Anime triggers for a tap Plains and a tap Swamp. We use our Lookout to block a soldier, and Tatiova offers up another token trade. Aerith doesn't block at all, and we sure hope they have a plan. Before damage, we make Ishin unable to block, criming our way into a Yavimaya Hollow from the top 5 of our deck. Tatiova and us end up at 15 and 14 from soldier beats, and Aerith has fallen all the way to 11 after letting all the soldiers and Adeline through. We draw Sword of Forge and Frontier and cast our Sword of Light and Shadow, equipping it to Hojo and drawing a Boseiju who endures. That would let us take out the helm, but at this point the damage is already done, and we're really banking on a sweeper from Tatiova or Aerith, and we'd be better off with another land in play. We swing into Ishin, and Hojo's protection from white means it gets through for a sword trigger, gaining us 3 and returning Eternal Witness to our hand, and adding another counter to the Jite. We spend 3 mana, using Bridgeworks Battle to have our lifelinking commander fight the helmed up original Adeline, and really wishing we'd done that back on turn 3. That's a crime, so we get a Blast Zone from our Lookout, which could help clean up those tokens in the unlikely event we get to untap. It also brings us up to 29 life after our earlier attack. There's a slim chance we survive and draw enough enhancement to get Hojo up to lethal on them next turn, so we play Boseiju in second main and cast Uvenwald Tracker so that we can chump block as many Adelines as possible. Tatiova untaps, playing Undergrowth Champion and then an Altar of the Brood. They play a Halimar Depths and get a slew of triggers, reordering their top 3, milling our Dowsing Dagger, Gigantomancer, and Rogue's Passage, and 3 cards from each other opponent. Undergrowth Champion picks up a counter, and Scootsworm makes another bug. The Altar triggers again, milling our Disciple of Freyalise. Tatiova draws them a card and gains them a life, and then the original Altar trigger mills our Beast Within, but more importantly, Aerith's Fumigate. Oof. They cast a Mere Scrappling, triggering Altar to mill our Buster Sword and a few more before passing. Aerith plays a Plains and actually has an interesting card given the board state, a Suture Priest, which will drain Ishin out if they swing for the fences next turn. It triggers the Sanctifier, giving Aerith another counter, and then they head to combat and unfortunately attack us again. Just like last time, we're better off blocking Adeline, so we take the hit and they gain 7, picking up another counter from their commander before passing. Ishin casts Hero of Bladehold, and we're pretty sure we're doomed. With double Battlecry triggers, they won't need to create enough tokens to take themselves out while being able to deal with the rest of us. Our only hope is that they won't find the line. Suture Priest drains them for 1 when the hero enters, and they attach the helm to the hero. They head to combat, making a copy, which Suture Priest drains them for again, and then attack with everything but the original hero and Ishin, dividing their army up between the 3 of us. They stack their triggers correctly, which means the game is over unless someone has a trick. Their Adelines add 12 more soldiers to the field, with Suture Priest draining them along the way, and then 4 more tokens from Hero of Bladehold with 4 more drains. Sword of the Animist grabs them 2 more tap basics, and the 2 Battlecry triggers give their whole board +2/+0. Blocking is a bit futile, but we want to die on our feet, so we block the Adeline coming our way and a token. Tatiova offers up 1 final insect, and Aerith blocks with their Sanctifier. The tokens still come crashing in though, making Ishin the winner of this game with damage to spare. Good game to our opponents. So this was a strange game. It's actually the first game on the channel where we haven't won, and I'm kind of excited to be able to include one. Believe it or not, we've only lost a handful of games since the channel started, and the losses to date haven't made for great content. Games need to highlight how our deck works, show something cool from our opponents, or have some overall lessons about the format for me to include them in a video, and this game was an example of the latter. The main lesson from this video centers on the Aerith player. As someone who plays pretty competitively, players like this can be frustrating. I don't have all the details, but my impression is that they're someone who's pretty new to the game and just wanted to build a life gain deck around a legend they liked, which is a totally valid approach to the format. It's important to recognize that. Everyone's fun is valid, and sometimes yours is going to come at the expense of someone else's, and vice versa. At an LGS, we might have been able to talk them through some better plays to give the table a chance against Isshin, but as it stood, we can only offer feedback afterwards, and hopefully that'll help them grow as a commander player. The second related lesson is that you can't always count on opponents to help deal with the big bad. It seemed like Tadiova had a proactive, fairly low-powered mill plan, potentially building up to some kind of bounce land combo, but not much in the way of interaction despite seeing plenty of cards. Aerith could have slowed down Isshin some, but we could have too, and the decision to develop our board and hope for decks that were better at removal to bail us out really came back to haunt us as the Adeline army grew. Seeing Isshin go off with Adeline in the helm was definitely cool though. Sometimes people don't interact with you and you just get to do the thing. I was surprised they didn't end the game the turn before. It seemed overly cautious given the open mana available and a board wipe being our only out, but they ended up getting their well-deserved win anyway. I think we have time for one more quick game. We win the die roll and get to go first. Going second is Emoti, Celebrant of Bounty, a Simic commander that cascades itself and gives mana value 6 or higher spells cascade. We're expecting the typical Simic plan of endless ramp into commander into big spells, but it's possible they're packing some spice. Next up is Zedru, the Great-Hearted, a Jeskai throwback. Zedru was one of the face commanders for the very first commander exclusive products, and I actually bought and upgraded this deck back in the day. There are a few different flavors of Zedru, ranging from group hug to war crimes, so we'll have to see what this list brings. Last but not least is Ural the Miststalker, another blast from the past. This Naya commander is basically the world's biggest boggle, and usually plays an Enchantress Voltron game plan. Our opening hand is solid, with 2 lands, some interaction, a Badoka Gardener to get extra lands into play down the line, and the 99th card in the deck, Ouroboros, which we added to pack some overall punch besides whatever Hojo gets up to. Most importantly, we have a piece of equipment to play on turn 3 and get the engine online. We draw Ursapine, which will have to wait for a while, and play our Forest. Emoti plays Vine Glimmer Snarl, revealing an island, and then casts Soul Ring. Zedru has a plateau, and Earl just plays a plains. We draw a second forest and play it, casting our commander. Emoti plays Academy Ruins, then floats a mana to cast Nature's Lore, searching up an untapped breeding pool, which they use to help cast a rampant growth, tutoring up an island. Target acquired. Zedru just has an island, tapping out and passing. Earl plays Taiga and casts a Core Spirit Dancer, possibly one of the best cards in an Earl deck. We draw a Pendlehaven and cast our Blackblade Reforge. We play the Haven, then equip to Hojo, drawing a Staff of Titania that goes pretty well with the land counting equipment. We swing at the ramping Simic player for 5 commander damage before passing. Emoti plays and cracks a Flooded Strand, grabbing a Tangled Islet, and then cast their commander and cascade into an Arcane Denial, which they opt not to cast. Counterspells are definitely a liability in a Cascade deck. Zedru sends Emoti on a journey to Oblivion, and Emoti heads back to the command zone instead. They follow up with Boros Garrison, bouncing their island to hand. Earl plays a tapped Alpine Meadow, then casts Spectral Steel on their Spirit Dancer, which triggers drawing them a card. They elect to leave their 4/6 on defense and pass to us. We draw Commander's Plate, which is going to make this a very quick game if no one can interact soon. We cast Staff of Titania, then play Witch's Clinic and equip the staff to Hojo, drawing an Uvam tracker. Emoti has been set pretty far back, and the next turn we could have unblockable lethal on them, so we push some damage on Earl instead. Staff of Titania triggers on attack, giving us a Dryad token, and they decide not to block with their card advantage engine. We pass, keeping up our Pendlehaven to get a trigger off Hojo before the turn comes back to us. Emoti plays a Nykthos and recasts their commander, cascading into Amphibian Downpour. It may have been a misclick, or maybe they're just making sure, but they put both copies on our commander. We activate Pendlehaven, targeting our Dryad before they resolve, drawing Ozil at the Shattered Spire, and then Emoti hits the field and they pass. Zedru replays their island and passes with probable interaction up. Earl casts Ellendumbra on the Spirit Dancer, drawing a card and making it a premium blocker. They follow up with Audacity, making it a solid beater as well, and drawing again. They play a layer of the Hydra and pass, which makes a lot of sense since even Frog Hojo is lethal for them. We draw and play a forest, then cast and equip Commander's Plate, paying full retail since Amphibious Downpour has removed Hojo's legendary super type. We head to combat and attack to remove the player who controls those pesky auras. Staff of Titania triggers, making another Dryad, and we connect, taking Emoti out. The Earl player scoops, mentioning that this is a little fast for their tastes. Before heading into their turn, Zedru casts Return to Dust, exiling our Commander's Plate. They untap and play a Vasuba, copying their Boros Garrison and bouncing their Plateau before passing. We draw a Druid of Purification and then cast our Ouroboros to diversify our threat portfolio. After equipping the staff to the Space Snake, drawing a Dowsing Dagger, we cast Ozolith and then head to combat. Ouroboros triggers and adds 7 counters to the whole team with a little help from Ozolith. We swing with Hojo and our opponent casts Lawmage's Binding, unfortunately getting the timing wrong on that one. Hojo connects for 16 commander damage and we pass the turn. Zedru replays their Plateau and casts Duplicate, exiling our 13/15 and making one of their own. We draw Cathedral Acolyte, but don't waste any time. We spree Collective Resistance to take out both the Binding and their blocker, and they concede, meaning that we win the match. Good game as always to our opponents. There really isn't much to talk about here other than how well Blackblade Reforged and Staff of Titania go together. I've never seen this deck take someone out so quickly, and it felt worthwhile to showcase what a Hojo Rampage can look like. We didn't get to see much of any of our opponent's decks, but shout out to Zedru for what was clearly a very old school list. There are several ways this deck could be improved, but personally I wouldn't change much. This is at the powerful end of bracket 3 already, for sure, and souping it up could be pretty oppressive at most tables. I think it's worth having a discussion ahead of games with a deck like this one to ensure everyone is on board, because playing it to its fullest and targeting down one player quickly can easily result in heavy feel-bads. From an academic standpoint though, the first improvement would be to play a few more cheap equipment that grant unrestricted evasion to Hojo. Being able to attack who we want when we want would increase the power level of the deck significantly, so cards like Trailblazer's Boots and Brotherhood Regalia would help add even more consistency to the plan. After that, I'd try to squeeze in some more good fight spells. We have plenty of ways to deal with non-creature permanents, so more creature removal would help, and with a few ways to give Hojo lifelink, being able to double dip on that by fighting and then attacking can make it hard for aggressive decks to race us. Kalni Ambush is an obvious inclusion, and Inscription of Abundance is versatile and plays into our counter sub-theme. Bushwhack is efficient and can basically be included in a land slot, and Ancient Animus and Tailswipe are both instant speed, which helps avoid getting blown out. As far as cards to cut, there are a few I wasn't impressed with. Summoning Materia was a little awkward considering how many non-creature spells we play, and I didn't encounter a single game where I cast Asceticism. It just felt very clunky. I also think the more expensive Targeters, Gigantomancer, and Ursipine could be replaced either with other effects or more efficient options. Finally, Perilous Vault just felt a little too hard to use. Exiling our equipment won't ever be ideal, and our other sweepers leave them intact or at least let us rebuy them from the graveyard. That's going to do it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and if you made it this far, definitely be sure to subscribe for more great Commander content each week. Sound off in the comments on the deck, the games, and what else you might like to see on the channel. I'm starting to get the hang of this and would love to incorporate viewer suggestions into future uploads. Good luck and have fun in your future endeavors. Magic Boy out.